Hello and welcome. I'm Steve. This is our first class in our series on celebrating our Jewish heritage. I am basing this on my years of study of Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov, one of my earliest teachers, through his books. And his thrust was on enriching our lives with lessons about our heritage. And he broke his books, the books of our heritage, is a 3-volume set. He broke the books into sections on each Jewish month. So I figured I would start us off talking about Tishrei. We just started Tishrei. And there's so many topics per month which we can choose. I'm going to start off our learning by choosing a topic that deals with both Rosh Hashanah as well as Parsha Breshit, the first Parsha, which we'll be reading soon. And it is the topic of how the biblical age of the universe matches the scientific calculation based on the teachings of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Rabbi Kaplan is also one of my favorite teachers for many years, and he's a master of matching Jewish traditional spiritual thought with modern day issues. And he does so here with this very question of how does the Torah calculate the universe, the age of the universe, and how does that compare with modern science? The source of these teachings are this book here, Immorality, Resurrection, and the Age of the Universe, a Kabbalistic View. Now, advisory. This is my understanding of what Rabbi Kaplan is saying. Don't take this as an authoritative interpretation of either his teachings or Kabbalah. This is not a Kabbalah class. The point today is to simply pique your interest and give you a taste of the profound wisdom of Torah. We are being recorded, so as you join, you can mute your video and your audio as needed. Okay, so let's get started. As you'll notice in the document we have, I give you significant quotes and I've referenced the page numbers. So I'll be going through the book and you'll see capsules of what I'm saying in the handout here. Feel free to ask for it and I'll be able to distribute it. But I think it'll help you make sense. So he starts out quoting a book called the Sefer HaTemunah, and he describes it as an ancient Kabbalistic work attributed to the first century Tana, Rabbi Nehemiah ben Hakana. The work discusses the form of the Hebrew letters and is the source of many of the most frequently cited opinions on this subject in halachic literature. It's page 6. And I give you some definitions of Tana and Mishnah here. Okay. Why is Rabbi Kaplan referring to this book initially in his quest for Torah sources about the age of the universe? It's because this book starts out with that conversation. And in particular, you'll see number one, it talks about sabbatical cycles. What are sabbatical cycles? There is a Talmudic teaching that he quotes that says the world will exist for 6,000 years, and in the 7,000th year, it will be destroyed. The Sefer HaTemunah states that this 7,000-year cycle is merely one sabbatical cycle. Okay. What is that talking about? Okay, we give you a definition of the Talmud here. Let's continue. Okay. Interestingly, according to Sefer HaTemunah, there were other worlds before Adam was created. These were the worlds of previous sabbatical cycles. So we're starting out with the idea of sabbatical cycles as signifying the length, the duration of the world. So the question is, how long is a cycle? Okay. Where do we get this from? Let's take a look. The world exists for 7 cycles. How long is a cycle? 49,000 years. How do we get to that? Let's take a look here. The universe was 42,000 years old when Adam was created. How do we know that? Because that's going by a cycle of 7,000 years. The point of this sefer is that that 6 cycles had been completed when Adam HaRishon was created. If each cycle is 7,000 years, then the universe was 42,000 years old when Adam was created, leaving another 7,000 years. Okay, because the world existed from the time of Adam was created going forward. Okay, let's take a look at the math. He then quotes a book called Ma'arechet Elokut, again quoting, mentioning that the world existed in sabbatical cycles before Adam was created. Okay. That book then quotes the Talmud. Let's take a look at what it says there. One of the important classical Kabbalistic works, Ma'arechet Elokut, states that the passage of the Medrash that says God created universes and destroyed them refers to worlds that existed in sabbatical cycles before Adam was created. And the same source states explicitly that the Midrashic teaching that there were orders of time before this creation is also speaking of earlier sabbatical cycles. So Rabbi Kaplan is saying that the phrase sabbatical cycles is what the Medrash and the Talmud are saying when they talk about life and death of various worlds before Adam HaRishon. Okay. He goes further to reference the Talmud, and he says, according to the Talmud, and some Midrashim as well, there were 974 generations before Adam. And he mentions also that the concept of pre-Adamic cycles was well known among the Rishonim, early authorities, and is cited as many earlier sources, including the Ramban. Okay. We'll get to the math in a second. Excuse me. So, he then quotes a sefer called Tiferet Yisrael, and he says this about it. One of the most recent authorities to speak about the concept of sabbatical cycles is Rabbi Yisrael Lipschitz, the author of Tiferet Yisrael, on the Mishnah, commentary on the Mishnah. At the end of the section on Ezekiel, he includes an essay entitled The Rush, or HaChayim. Since this work speaks of earlier creations and of human beings existing before Adam, it was extremely controversial, of course. Okay. Rabbi Lipshitz's approach is very interesting. He cites the Kabbalistic idea of universes existing before Adam, and then concludes, see how the teachings of our Torah have been vindicated by modern discoveries. His motivation as well was to match Torah wisdom with scientific wisdom and see if there's a match. Okay. The Sefer HaTemunah establishes the age of the world, at least according to some classical interpretations, at 42,000 years. That is, the world was 42,000 years old when Adam was created. Okay, and this teaching was subject to a highly significant interpretation by Rabbi Isaac of Akko. Okay, that brings us to see Rabbi Isaac of Akko. He was a student and colleague of the Ramban and one of the foremost Kabbalists of his time. Okay, and Rabbi Kaplan says here, several years ago, quoting him in this book, As part of a research project, I obtained a photocopy of one of Rabbi Isaac's important works, Ozar HaChaim. And in it, I discovered, says Rabbi Kaplan, an entirely new interpretation of the concept of sabbatical cycles. So this is a testimony to Rabbi Kaplan's diligence as a Torah scholar. He actually got copies of what we would consider esoteric or non-mainstream manuscripts and interpretations and commentaries and references them in his research. And as you get to know Rabbi Kaplan, you see that more and more, as he deals with what we call these esoteric commentaries, they really convey traditional Jewish thinking that has been cast aside to the sidelines. And one of Rabbi Kaplan's life missions was to bring these teachings more to the mainstream, and that's what we're doing today in his name. Okay. So now we get to the math. How do we get to this age of 49,000 years? This is what he says. Rabbi Isaac of Akko writes that since the sabbatical cycles existed before Adam, their chronology must be measured not in human years, but in what he calls divine years. Thus, the Sefer HaTemunah is speaking of divine years when it states that the world is 42,000 years old. Okay, this has some startling consequences. Why? According to many Midrashic sources, a divine day is 1,000 earthly years long, and a divine year consisting of 365 and a quarter days is equal to 365,250 earthly years. So again, a divine day, when we're talking about sabbatical cycles, when we're talking about pre-Adam Rishon, a divine day is 1,000 earthly years long, and a divine year of 365 and a quarter days is equal to 365,250 earthly years. That's 1 year. That's one divine year. So what's the math? According to Rabbi Isaac of Akko, the universe would be 42,000 times 365,250 years old. This comes out to be 15,340,500,000 years. Okay, again, let's backtrack a little bit. There's Torah sources that talk about sabbatical cycles. There's Torah sources that talk about there being 7 sabbatical cycles. There's Torah sources that talk about there being 6 of these sabbatical cycles to the time when Adam HaRishon was created. So then the question is, how long is a sabbatical cycle? Each one is 7,000 years. Okay. So if there are 7,000 divine years, so if there were 6 of those, up until the point Adam HaRishon was created, 6 times 7, 42, 6 times 7,000, 42,000. 42,000 times how much is a year? How much is a divine year? In our terms, 365,250. So 42,000 times 365,250 equals the 15 billion years of our years. And he also goes on to mention, by the way, that there's Rashi on this, and and you can also look at the different meaning of the words in text, which we'll get to at another point. Okay. So according to this, the age of the universe, 42,000 years, divine years equals 15 some odd billion of our years. Why is that important? Again, the premise here is to see if there's a match between the Torah calculation of the age of the universe and science. Rabbi Kaplan says definitively, from calculations based on the expanding universe and other cosmological observations, modern science has concluded that the Big Bang occurred approximately 15 billion years ago. 15 billion. And what did the Torah calculation come up with? 15,340, 500,000 years. There's a very close match here. I went and did a search. Very common sources, the American Museum of Natural History and NASA both come up with a 13.8 billion figure as opposed to the 15.3 billion. And to tell you the truth, if you move on and you look at other sources, you'll come up with different calculations for the age of the universe. 16 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, close enough. Why close enough? Because I think Rabbi Kaplan's chief purpose is to say, wait a minute. If modern thinkers are calculating the age of the universe to be multiple billions, and the Jewish people are saying, well, no, the age of the universe is only 5785. We just turned the corner with Rosh Hashanah. There's a discrepancy. You have to believe either one. No. Rabbi Kaplan is telling us that there are Torah sources to show us that calculations can be made with different units of measure from some very wise people, and we can get pretty darn close, give or take a couple of billion, and obviously the modern calculations are subject to change at times. So what's really significant is the fact that these Torah calculations come up with a figure that's really super close to modern calculations. Very interesting. So with what are considered to be standard and mainstream Torah sources, Medrash, Talmud, Mishnah, interpreted by people who take a out-of-the-box approach, let's say a more mystical approach, we come close to the numbers of modern science in the age of the universe. Okay. But we like to also get more of a grounding in Torah, meaning, okay, what about Chumash? What about the 5 books of Moses? We have somewhat of a lay understanding of the creation of the universe from reading the Torah over and over again, the 5 books of Moses. Is there any correlation between the knowledge we gain from reading the 5 books of Moses, from Chumash, and these calculations from other sources? Yeah, okay. Rabbi Kaplan will guide us here. Okay. He starts out, and you can see here number 1, E1. He starts out by emphasizing that in Chumash, there are 2 accounts of creation. Okay. He shows the first account is recorded in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3, and the second is in Genesis 2:4 to 23. And we have the text below, which I'll show you. Okay. One of the key differences between the 2 accounts is when were man and woman created? Okay. This is what he says. In the first, he says, there are several discrepancies between these 2 versions, which are noted in the Talmud and Medrash, which kind of shed light on the different ideas about time that we're going to be dealing with when we calculate the age of the universe. In the first version, the Torah says, God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created him. It's from Genesis 1:27. And this would appear to indicate that man and woman were created simultaneously. On the other hand, the second version states explicitly that Eve was created from Adam's rib, or his side. The Talmud raises this question and then explains, that God created man and woman simultaneously in thought, but created Adam first and Eve from his rib in actual deed. Okay. So Rabbi Kaplan quoted the Talmud, as the Talmud is trying to explain the difference in these creation accounts, as saying there's creation in thought and creation in deed. And there are other examples that Rabbi Kaplan gives to show that throughout Shas, throughout Jewish Torah knowledge, there are differentiations between creation in thought and creation in deed. Okay. So then he says, it would appear that the 7 days of creation described in the Torah actually occurred in thought rather than deed, meaning that the creation story that we're very familiar with, that we constantly review, day 1, second day, third day, all the way to Shabbat, these are being created in thought. Of course, he says God's thoughts are not the same as ours, and it is possible to say that creation and thought actually refers to the creation of the spiritual counterparts of the physical world. And he quotes Hasidic sources to say this. So what is it saying? So he's coaching us to say, when we say that God is creating the universe in thought, don't necessarily think about how we think. He's guiding us to say that when God creates a world in thought, we should refer to it as the spiritual counterpart of the physical world. Still spiritual, but it is a spiritual counterpart to the physical world. You can see here in C, thoughts are spiritual counterparts. Okay. So we can then conclude that when we ask a question, how old is the universe? We are in a sense saying, how long has the universe been becoming spiritual? And I'll explain that in a second. And we could also say, when we say to somebody, how old are you? We can say, how long have you been becoming spiritual? Because the original creation was a spiritual counterpart to the physical. Okay. What are we saying here? Rabbi Kaplan is saying that classical Torah sources not only maintain that the universe is billions of years old, but present the exact figure proposed by modern science. Again, give or take 16 billion. There are two accounts of creation in the Torah. The first speaking of the spiritual infrastructure of the universe, which was completed in 7 days. I'm putting 7 days in quotation marks because it's not the same day as we're referring to. This took place some 15 billion years ago, before the Big Bang. The second account speaks of the creation of Adam, which took place less than 6,000 years ago, 5785. Okay, so he's alluding to different stages in the creation of the universe. I will summarize them. First, we're here at A. The 7 days of creation take place over 15 billion years ago. Rabbi Kaplan keeps saying over 15 billion years ago. Over 15 billion years ago. This is creation in thought and produces the spiritual infrastructure of the universe, which is reflected in the first creation account, Genesis 1:1 to 2:3. Again, what is that account? That's here in the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth was tohu v'vohu. We're familiar with this. Let there be light, and God saw that was light. 1 day, day 2, okay. That he is saying, based on his sources, that this was a creation account totally spiritual. That spiritual counterparts to the physical universe were created all over 15 billion years ago, before we started dating the age of the universe. Okay, then was the be a Big Bang. That's when science says there was a Big Bang. And that's when the universe started manifesting physically the spiritual infrastructure. And over the next 15 billion years, it goes through a process of physical forms becoming more spiritual. So the 15 billion years of the age of the universe is a spiritual evolution of physical forms becoming more and more and more spiritual until 5785 years ago, it culminates in the creation of Adam Rishon as the spiritually sensitive human being. That's what he says here on page 11. He says, the universe then developed according to God's plan, guided by their spiritual infrastructure over the billions of years. Finally, less than 6,000 years ago, God created Adam as the first of a new type of being. Although human beings may have existed before Adam, he was the first to acquire a special spiritual sensitivity and be able to commune with God. So that accounts for the ideas that there were people before Adam. They just didn't have this spiritual connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Creator. He was the first. Okay. So then, that happens 85 years ago. Then we have the second account of creation. Genesis 2:4-23, which is over here. This is what we're reciting in the Friday night Kiddush. We're talking about the completion of creation. These are the generations of heaven and earth. Okay. When Eve is created, so-called out of Adam's rib or side. Okay. So in summary, this gives us something to think about, because what it brings to light is that there are actually 3 units of measure of a day when we talk about creation and the age of the universe. The first is the creation day, which takes place in the first account of creation, and it has no unit of measure. Why doesn't it have a unit of measure? It's because it's fully spiritual, and you can't measure something that has no physical characteristics. So when we say day in that creation, we're referring to some occurrence that we can't relate to in the physical world because it's not physical. It's entirely spiritual. Then 16 billion years ago, we have the Big Bang and the emergence of the divine day, which in our units of measure is 1,000 years, culminating, and which lasts for 16 billion years, and which culminates in the creation of Adam, the first spiritually sensitive being. And it's only at that point that the day becomes the day as we know it, and lasting 24 hours. And that's been the unit of measure of a day for 85 years. So this is how Rabbi Kaplan correlates the calculation of the age of the universe in our world with modern science calculations, using a variety of sources, Mishnah and Talmud, the interpretations of Kabbalistic thinkers, yet also grounding all the thinking in the text of the Chumash, and showing how it explains one of the standard questions we always ask when we study Chumash is, why are there two interpretations, two presentations of the creation of this world, and why are they different? And there you go. So thank you so much for joining us. I look very much forward to meeting you again when we have a class on Cheshvan.